Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. This is Lori Smith on Blog Talk Radio. This is Child Abuse Prevention and Human Rights Abuse Prevention is Up to Us. 30-minute live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. And chat room is open if anybody would like to go sit in there. I did pop the link in there to what we were talking about on Monday night. And I couldn't do my show last night. Skype was down, and that's the program that that I use to do my shows, and just because I can't afford the long distance, and so I couldn't do my shows last night or this morning. So sorry about that. But I thought I'd just I don't usually do a show Thursday nights, but I thought, well, I'll just do it anyway because I missed the show last night. And this information is really, really pretty good. I hope everybody's getting something out of this. This is from the Canadian Resource Center for Victims of Crime. It's http://crcvc.ca. That's the Canadian Resource Center for Victims of Crime. It's a great website. There's all kinds of info on there, links and resources. Just click under the Resources tab, and it'll take you to publications and information sheets and whatnot. And we were talking, it's just really, this particular PDF, it's a PDF that we were looking at Monday night and actually last week as well. And it's talking about the, what is child abuse and how can you help the victim of child abuse. And the actual title is called Child Abuse, How to Help Victims. It was written June 2006, and it was written by a person. They don't say really the full name. They just give the last name, Hillingworth. So Hillingworth wrote this article back in June 2006, and I just think there's really some good information on here, and I just thought we'd just sort of take a look at it. So we're working our way here through the article. So thanks everybody for tuning in. I'm not a professional counselor or therapist or anything like that. I don't hold any certificates in those areas. I'm just a private citizen paying to do my own blog talk shows, and that's mainly because I'm a survivor of child abuse, and I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, and I'm just working to stand up and speak out publicly against child abuse and stand up for child rights. Somebody's got to do it. We all need to be doing this. If we're ever going to make a difference in this mess that these children are going through right now, then we're going to have to. All of us are going to have to make some noise, you know what I mean? Every one of us. So we all have a voice, and we all have something that we can do, in our own capacity and our own capabilities, right, to change this thing for children, right? And we cover the headlines on Dreamcatchers Talk Radio here Tuesday nights and Friday nights generally throughout the week. Well, throughout the week there's shows Monday through Friday, but Tuesday nights we take a look at the child abuse headlines as well as Friday nights. And it's just disturbing, the stuff that's going on out there. These children are losing their lives to the hands of their parents, caregivers, child sexual predators and whatnot. If they're not killed and murdered, many of them end up in the hospital due to the abuse that they suffered, and it's absolutely horrific. And I know because I'm a survivor what happens to children, and I'm just very thankful to be here. I used to be wishing I was dead, but now as an adult, looking back on the situation, I'm extremely glad that I'm still here and that. I wasn't killed as a child, right? It's horrible what these kids are going through, right? So this is why I'm doing these shows, just to be one more voice out here, and also another voice for survivors. There's so many survivors of child abuse; it's absolutely horrific. And I know myself. I know so many people who are survivors of child abuse, adult survivors, and many times, it just feels like we're so alone. Because, nobody's talking about it. Nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody wants to deal with it. And society and everybody else just wants to continue to push, the issues of child abuse underneath the carpet and hide it away, And it's like, if we're ever going to make any changes and stop this mess, we're all going to have to start talking about it. We're going to have to come up with programs that work. We're going to have to get the funding going where it needs to be going. And it's really going to be up to us to do it. Who else is going to do it, right? 4 years ago, that's when I got off the couch and I decided to get involved to make a difference in this world, to try to be a proactive part of this positive change, and I thought, well, I'm just, I could no longer sit on the sidelines, I was perfectly happy sitting on the sidelines before that, just watching other people do all this work and thinking, oh, this is great. Thank God for those people out there that help people out and do these things that, work to help to save children's lives, and everybody that's just doing something to help somebody. And then I thought, well, why am I not doing something? Why am I just sitting here on the couch? I don't like what I see out here. I don't like what I went through as a child. I don't like, and I know what these kids are going through, many of them. And so it's horrible, right? And I thought, okay, no, I can be a voice too. So that's why I'm doing these shows. So you have to listen at your own discretion. I'm talking about child abuse and everything to do with, abuse, period. abuse is a sensitive topic, and so you have to know what's good for you to listen to. So if the show bothers you, if this topic of abuse bothers you, it's really ultimately your discretion. You have to turn the show off if you feel uncomfortable. You have to make the right choice for yourself. And young people under the age of 18, I just ask that you have permission to listen to my show, because there's a lot of adult content on my shows. I have no idea how young the people are who are listening to my shows. Ultimately, it's about stopping child abuse, right? So, but the thing is it could be, age appropriateness is an issue, and there's a chat room present. Anytime there's a chat room present, children should know that they need to be aware, of how to protect themselves when they're online. So young people, anybody under the age of 18, have permission to listen to my show, and then learn how to keep yourself safe online, right? It's really important. Just type into your browser, internet safety, online safety for children, anything like that. It will bring you to websites that will give you some really good information on how to keep yourself safe if you haven't already done that, right? So we'll get right into this topic here. Thanks, everybody, for being here. I appreciate it. This is we were left off talking about the signs of abuse, right? That was on Monday night. And this article, Hillingworth, goes on to sort of describe, the signs of or possible signs of abuse, right? So we were talking about physical injuries, such as cuts, bruises, burns, and fractures. They talk about here lack of adult supervision, sexual acting out, difficulty walking or sitting, evidence of poor hygiene, aggressive, disruptive, sometimes illegal behavior, depending on, what the age of the child, anger and rage, self-destructive or self-abusive behavior, suicidal thoughts we were talking about, passive withdrawn or clinging behavior, anxiety and fears in general, fear of certain person or place. Now, this is sort of where we left off, and, we were talking about this Monday. It's like it's all kind of, some of these things are very hard to spot. Child abuse, if there's physical evidence and a child's been battered and beaten, burned, stabbed, physically wounded, and there's physical marks, it's a lot easier to tell, if a child's been abused, right? But so many times children are psychologically, abused and emotionally abused and even sexually abused where, there's no real physical signs. And if you didn't know, what to look for, you could just miss it. And so it's just really important to know that, all the signs and symptoms, right? I think this would really solve a lot of the problems if everybody knew the signs and symptoms and then, knew to report it, right? It's just important, right? Because that's the whole issue. Some of this stuff is very, very hard to spot. Physical abuse is pretty easy to spot, even some neglect, right? Poor hygiene or children just not malnourished, not getting medical attention, that type of things. So it's just so important that everybody get, the info, learn the signs and symptoms, and, just make sure that you are aware because it's so serious. It's incredibly serious. And so I'm just typing a quick message here. Sorry about that. So yeah, this is so important to know the signs and symptoms. Fear of certain person or place, that's an issue with children. A lot of times people, parents and caregivers and whatnot, if their child, was going to a daycare, let's just say, I'm just using that for an example, and all of a sudden, and they were fine. They didn't mind going. They liked it. They seemed to be getting along well there. And then all of a sudden, the child, your child starts to panic when you take them to the daycare, and they don't want to go, and they're afraid, and they say no, that they don't want to go. You got to kind of wonder what happened there, and what happened at the daycare that would cause them to have that kind of fear, or if a child is sometimes parents will make their children kiss and hug family relatives and stuff, and if a child really doesn't want to do that, it's actually a good idea to not force them to, because there could be something about that person that bothers the child. You know what I mean? Like it's just, it's silly to force kids to do that sort of thing. Like, oh no, kiss your aunt or kiss your uncle or whatever, or they just because they want their child to love this family member. But the thing is that there's 1 out of 3 girls and 1 out of 6 boys. This is a stat everywhere you look. This is all done by federal government studies, and they know that it's underreported. But 1 out of 3 girls and 1 out of 6 boys will be sexually abused in some way under the age of 18, right? And so it's 90 to 95% of abuse happens within the home, especially child sexual abuse. It's wherever the child is, right? Where do children spend their time? Well, children spend their time with their parents, caregivers, somebody who's a sitter, somebody who's watching the child, family member, right? Where are the children? Well, they're generally at home, and if they're not at home, they're at a sitter's or daycare or school. So where's abuse happening? It's happening in the homes. It's happening in the daycares. It's happening at the babysitters. It's happening at the relatives' homes. This is where child abuse is taking place, right? And so people just don't quite often think about that, right? And they would think, well, this would never happen in my home. This would never happen in my family. Wouldn't happen on my street. Well, it does. And the sad thing is that 90 to 95% of abuse is someone that the child knows and trusts. And so, especially child sexual abuse. And so, it's just important to know the facts. Ignorance is not bliss, and education will get you a lot further than fear. So it's better to get the information, learn how to protect your children, learn how to protect yourself, and just know that this stuff can happen, does happen. And all these child sexual predators that are sitting out here and in the courts and in the jail cells right now, who have been convicted, found guilty of child sexual abuse, they have brothers and sisters, they have mothers and fathers, they have grandparents, right? They might be grandparents, they might be parents, these are people, that use children sexually for their own gratification and for many other reasons. It's just very sick and twisted, and the sad thing is it's family members, right? But people just don't want to admit the truth, right? People just have such an issue with truth, right? Because truth hurts. And it does hurt, to think that a family member could do that to someone in the family. I'm a survivor of child sexual abuse, so I know. And the whole issue is the rest of the family doesn't even want to hear about it, because they're like, then they have to do something about it, right? Nobody wants grandpa to go to jail. Nobody wants aunt so-and-so to go to jail, right? Women abuse children sexually too. Everybody should know this. Anybody can be an abuser, right? It doesn't matter how young or old or what gender you are. It's anybody who chooses to abuse. That's an abuser, right? So it's just so important for people to know, that if your child is acting differently, their behaviors are changing, and you're just not sure why. Well, it's just a really good idea to keep an eye on the signs and symptoms, and really watch your children's behavior and make sure that everything's okay with them, right? Because there's a lot of sick people out there. Really, just look at the headlines. They're rolling in day after day after day. And a lot of it is child sexual abuse, and it's absolutely horrific what people are doing to children. And, they just feel, these child sexual predators and pedophiles and whatnot, they think it's just great. But the rest of us don't. And so it's just, we know it's against the law. It's a crime and punishable by law, thank God. And so, people just need to get the information and realize this stuff is happening. And there's no sense in living in fear and just distrusting everybody. Best thing to do is get educated and learn how to protect your family, learn how to protect your children, right, and yourself. It's so important. Here's some other sort of signs. School problems or failure, for instance, irregular attendance, significant change in performance or behavior at school, feelings of sadness or other symptoms of depression, flashbacks or nightmares, bedwetting, like let's say your child was already, well past the stage of bedwetting, and then all of a sudden they revert back to bedwetting. That's definitely, these are signs that, there could be, they're not necessarily the be all and end all. If you see some of this in your, in your child's behavior, that it would be abuse, but it's the fact that if you see a lot of this, then there could be something going on, and it's just a good idea to make sure that you get your child some help, right? Sleep and eating problems or stomach illness at all the time with no identifiable reason. So, illnesses and whatnot, children complaining about stomach aches just from, nervous tension and stuff. If your child's acting like that, there's something going on. Children just naturally don't act like that unless something's wrong. You know what I mean? So it's a good idea to check it out. So Hillingworth goes on to say, in addition, children who are experiencing physical abuse may not be willing to explain an injury or be afraid of physical contact. And, that's just it. Children, who are being abused physically, they quite often, they'll flinch, or they don't want anybody to touch them. That was my case. I didn't really like people to touch me, and I didn't appreciate people, attempting to hug me or anything like that, even as a child, because my mom was pushing me away. So I was, she wasn't hugging me, she was pushing me away. So that's what I did to everybody else when I grew up. I grew up like that, so that's how I treated other children my own age and other people. And I just didn't want anybody touching me, because and anybody would come, it's like a reaction, a natural reaction to flinch. And I definitely had that problem for a long time, because both of my parents were both physically abusive towards me. So it was very much it's just something, if you're beaten enough, it can happen. Children who are emotionally abused often need a lot of attention. Children who often appear hungry, listless, and tired may be experiencing neglect. And those who take on responsibility beyond normal age expectation may be experiencing an exposure to domestic violence. Any of this is kind of, is serious. It's something definitely to be paying attention to. It says boys and girls are generally affected differently by abuse. Girls are more likely to internalize their response to violence and experience, for example, suicidal ideation, eating disorders, low self-esteem, and psychological disorders. They said here boys are more likely to externalize their response in violence, displaying, for example, increased aggression, delinquency, and spousal abuse. And this is not always the case, but sometimes, and it is a cycle of abuse, right? What people see, what children grow up seeing in their home, they don't always, continue the cycle of abuse on. Quite a few don't. And it's awesome to see that, people who grew up in these situations and then they say, there's no way that they would let that happen in their home, and they do the best they can to, to make sure that it doesn't and break the cycle of abuse, right? But so many others don't, and they continue the abuse, the cycle of abuse on. And so, it's just a possibility that it could happen, right? They said boys who have been exposed to violence in their homes are more likely to be violent in their adolescent and adult relationships than boys who are not exposed to violence. So it's not that it's just 100%. You know what I mean? It's just that some may take on that behavior, right? Just what they see happening in the home, they might continue it on in their own lives, thinking that that's the way it's supposed to be done. And and that's the way life is, right? And sadly enough, so many people do pass the cycle on, and that's why it still continues on today. High-risk adult behaviors. There is no stereotypical child abuser. In fact, most abusers present as normal, contributing members of the community. Here are some possible warning signs of abusers. I mean, abusers are people like my parents, right? Who were brought up on abuse charges, right? Child abuse charges, or they were arrested and they had to go to court, and they had 7 children that they abused, and they would have had 10, but three were stillborn, so there was 7 of us, and the courts were like, well, we're going to remove your children. My mom was like pleading with them, and my parents didn't look like, they just looked like average people. They didn't look like, they didn't have a sign with a big sign around their neck saying abuser. They had a lot of friends. They had support. People liked them. People in the neighborhood liked them, even though they knew that they were brought up on charges and they knew that they were beating the crap out of their kids and each other. My parents were very violent towards each other as well, and hateful people. They had a lot of friends. They had a lot of support because when they wanted to, they could have fun. You know what I mean? When they wanted to behave themselves and straighten up their act, they could get along quite well, right? Outside at certain people's homes, they would drop the boxing gloves for a bit, and then as soon as we all got back in the car to go home or walk across the street or whatever, it would all start again. And that was just the way they lived their lives. That's the way they chose to live. Unfortunately, they ruined their whole. They destroyed our family. But it's just sad because people just think abusers have a certain sign around them or a certain look to them. Abusers, if you look at the child abuse headlines out there, which that's what we do, right? It's what I do because this is what I'm doing. I'm trying to prevent, we're working to stop child abuse, right? So I'm looking at these headlines out here, and these people look just like every average, everyday people, right? Even the people that rape their 2-week-old babies and stuff, and, men who rape and kill their 11-week-old babies, right? This happens. This is happening all the time. And it's absolutely ridiculous. And some women do that too, right? So it's not just men. And, they look like average Joes just who live down the street. There's no different look to them than there is to anybody else, And that's the sad part. You just can't spot someone who's an abuser. So you have to, they do, like on this article, they talk about, here's some possible warning signs of abusers, whether it's a parent or a caregiver or relative or child sexual predator, whoever an abuser would be. It would be behavioral, right? Refuses to let a child set any of his or her own limits, insists on hugging, touching, kissing, tickling, wrestling with, or holding a child even when the child does not want this affection, is overly interested in the sexuality of a particular child or teen. For example, talks repeatedly about the child's developing body or interferes with normal teen dating. Manages to get time alone or insists on time alone with the child with no interruptions. And that's a big one. There's lots of great websites out there that talk about child sexual abuse, right, and prevention. And they say that really the best way to do it is just to limit one adult, one child situations. That is the number one way to really stop child sexual abuse. Limit adult one child, one adult situations. Even though it wouldn't stop it completely, because there's daycares out there that, there's daycares out there where the whole daycare staff are child sexual predators, and they just molest all the children, and they're all in on it together. But the sad thing, mostly it's just one adult, one child situations where the abuse is happening, and it's generally a family member. So what they do say, this is some pretty good advice that I've got from websites like littlewarriors.ca out of Edmonton, Alberta, here in Canada. Little Warriors, www.littlewarriors.ca. That's a great website. It's all about child sexual abuse prevention, right? And there's some great info on there. And they were talking about the fact that, and I've seen this on other websites as well, Child Welfare Information Gateway and whatnot, that if you're a parent and you obviously so many people have to work these days, there's just has to be two incomes, it's no longer where one of the parents can stay home and look after the child, right? Nowadays everything's so expensive and everybody would like to have these nice things, so of course it's almost impossible not to. You have to have two jobs, there has to be two incomes, quite often, right? So lots of people have to work, and they have to leave their children with, or they might want to work. They might want to be out, having a career and whatnot. Nothing wrong with that, but the whole issue is it's really, you got to just know who your child is with, right? And even if it's a family member, they said best thing to do is, if you really should check up on the situation. So they said the best thing to do is maybe just pop in unexpectedly. And don't do it all the time at the same time, because then they'll know that you're coming. But just kind of periodically, like, oh, I forgot this, or oh, I needed to come and drop this off for the child, right? And just make an excuse, even if it's a family member, because you would not believe how many family members sexually abuse children. It's absolutely disgusting, absolutely disgraceful. You know what I mean? That a grandfather would sexually molest their children. But I know survivors whose grandparents, or grandfathers sexually abuse them, and I'm a survivor of incest myself, so it's absolutely horrific what people do to children. And I mean, my God, people would think, well, only strangers would sexually abuse a child. No, it's generally the family. Someone in the family will do this, and they will think it's perfectly okay. It's just a game, it's just fun for them, and it's abuse, and it's against the law. It is punishable by crime, and it makes me sick that people think that this is okay, because it's not. And it's so people, you just can't even trust really your own family, right? You do have to check up on your own family. You know what I mean? This is so sad that people just think, oh, it would never happen in my family, and then they find out later that Uncle so and so or Aunt so and so has been videotaping the baby while they've been doing these sexual acts with them, and it just makes you sick to your stomach, because you're thinking, what is the matter with these sick people? And really we need tougher laws. We need tougher penalties. Like to me it just seems like the courts it's just a joke, right? It's like somebody caught, abusing a child sexually should go to prison for life, period. And that way you get enough people going to prison for life with no chance for parole whatsoever. They're just going in and they are never coming out. A lot of people would be deterred. They really would, because they would be like, "Oh my God, look at the last 2,000 child abusers who abused children sexually, who went to court and were found guilty, went away for life." That means that I better, what I mean. They might think a little bit more clearly than about doing that. It's just so disgraceful. They get a couple of years, get time off for good behavior, and then that child has to deal with the fact that they've been molested or raped or sodomized or sexually abused in some way by a family member. You know what I mean? This makes me sick, and it just, I don't know, it just bothers me, but I'm a survivor, so there you go. And I mean, I told my mom, I talk about this a lot on my other show in the morning, One Child Abuse Survivor to Another, and I mean, I've written my book and went public, right? But the whole issue is I told my mom that I was in pain, right? And because my brother was sexually molesting me, and so she just told me that was my problem. I was going to have to deal with it. It was my problem. She said, you have to wrap yourself up in a blanket or something and don't bother me with this again. But my mom was my main abuser, so she was beating on me and practically killing me. And so really I kind of didn't push it with her. I mean, I told her and that was all, that was it. So, you know, a lot of times parents won't do the right thing by their children, right? So many times people in the family will not do the right thing by their children. They will hurt their children, they will abuse them in every way, and then you know, everybody just expects the child to just get over it. Oh, get over it, you know. Well, you know, it's not that easy, right? And this is why we have to stop child abuse, because it's against the law. It is completely wrong, and you know, that's why we all have to speak out against this, right? It's absolutely horrible. There's more, you know, sort of behavioral things that they talk about as far as, you know, what types of behaviors an abuser might have, and that would be that they would spend most of his or her spare time with children and has little interest in spending time with someone their own age, someone who just wants to be around children all the time. And you know, that's generally where child sexual predators and pedophiles like to work. They like to work around children. So they'll quite often try to get into schools as janitors and coaches, mentors, and whatnot. And so it's very important to know this, that, you know, sexual abusers, child sexual abusers want to be where the kids are, right? So they can take advantage and use these kids, right? Because they're just using them. They're just using them for a sex toy. There's some sort of sickness. I don't know what's going on in their heads, but children are not sex toys. And, you know, adults should be having, you know, leaving the children alone, because adults don't have any right to have sexual relations with a child. And that makes me so angry that there's people out here trying to sign petitions to get Congress to change the laws, you know, that they're to allow adult child sexual relations. It makes me sick to my stomach. No, let's let kids be kids and have fun and grow up and find their own sexuality and with their own peers, and let these old, crazy, sick and twisted people who have these problems, you know, they need to go away. You know what I mean? Far, far away. Because no one has the right to even touch a child inappropriately, sexually. And yet society says, no big deal, perfectly fine. You know? I mean, you should see the headlines that are out there just recently. You know, we have people raping their 11-week-old babies and killing them. Raping. How can you do that? What is wrong with people? This is in North America. This is in the United States. This is in Canada. You know, this isn't some, you know, poor country somewhere where they have no brain cells left because they've not had anything to eat for the last six years or something. The whole issue is you know, this is North America where we know this stuff is wrong, and yet we have so many sick people out here. So what is going on? Here's some more signs of an abuser, right? They said that regularly offers to babysit many different children for free and takes children on overnight outings alone. That you better watch out for. You know, you do not want to let your children go with just anybody, boy. You better do a background check on them, and you want to make sure there's going to be a lot of people around. You know, I would never let my child go anywhere with somebody. You just can't. Even though you think you can trust people and you think that you can even trust a family member, but you really can't, because that's how sick and twisted people are. 1 out of 3 girls and 1 out of 6 boys will be sexually abused in some way under the age of 18. See, if you know 3 women, then you know 1 more than likely has been abused in some way, whether it's unwanted sexual touching, you know, or all, you know, molestation, rape, whatever. And 1 out of 6 girls. So 1 out of 6 boys. I'm sorry. 1 out of 3 girls, 1 out of 6 boys. So this is the thing. How many? You know, that's a lot of survivors of child sexual abuse. You know, it's horrible. Never should happen. And sadly enough, it happens all the time. Here's another thing. They buy children expensive gifts or give them money for no apparent reason. They frequently walk in on children, teens in the bathroom. Right? They always kind of ogling and oogling, right? Allows children or teens to consistently get away with inappropriate behavior. So those are signs of, you know, to watch out for, right? So we have about a minute left. Thanks, everybody, for being here. I really appreciate it. I'll be back on tomorrow morning, One Child Abuse Survivor to Another, and same time, same place, 6 o'clock a.m., and, you know, Christmas Eve and everything. And we got to remember these kids out here. There'll be lots of kids out here, you know, who will die tonight. They'll die tomorrow night, and they'll die on Christmas Day too, because they'll die from abuse. You know what I mean? They'll be murdered. They'll be killed at the hands of their parents and caregivers, all because they were crying because they wanted a toy or something, or, you know, because they were crying because they were hungry and the parents just couldn't take it, or, you know, they were interrupting the parents' time on Farmville or something, right? Children will die. They'll lose their lives tonight. We all have to do something, and we all have to do it now. It should be this generation. Why not? You know, it should be. Why do we have to keep passing this off to another generation? Let's do it now. And I'm glad to be another voice, right? Because we all need to be a voice for these kids out here, right? So have a great night, everybody, and we'll talk to you real soon. And I'll be back on tomorrow morning. And I just wish you a very happy holiday season and all the best to you. Take care. Bye bye.